muted.
There we go. There we go. That
There
was
we
my
go.
fault. I was just saying that.
All right, now we're talking.
Yeah. See, I was just saying we're going to have some fun tonight, having a chat with Ryan from G Bar Naturals and Honeybee Relocation Services. I was saying we were building a fence back by the chickens. My neighbor has a fence back there that's falling apart, and I decided to put something in a little nicer. So we're going to be doing some things back there by the chickens. Anyway, yeah, it was fun to catch up with you on Saturday and take care of some roosters. They're doing quite well in my refrigerator.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah, for sure. So anyway, yeah, no, I was just, whenever I talk with you, I'm always impressed. You just have a lot of wisdom and a lot of different ways of looking at things than I do, for sure. So yeah, I thought it would be kind of fun to pick your brain a little bit and let you share a little bit about what you're doing as well. It's very interesting to me that the space that you have there in downtown, I call it downtown. For me, it's downtown. I guess it's not officially downtown Dallas, but
yeah, here this close to downtown Dallas. I think we claim we're about 10, 15 minutes from downtown Dallas.
Yeah.
But that's really the skyline, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, for sure. And the space you have there is kind of unique. And I kind of enjoy that space. It's almost like a little enclave that's there right in the middle of everything.
Yeah, it does sort of feel like the rest of the world fades away a little bit once you walk out into an open natural space, even being in the middle of the city. And having the creek running through the middle of what we've got here certainly expands that feeling of nature and space and that experience as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, tell me a little bit about that space. And I know you didn't live too far from there, but when you found it, or I guess maybe you knew it was there, but tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm in East Dallas essentially, and I've been living, generally speaking, in this neighborhood for a couple decades now. But I was living one block over from where I am now when I noticed that this property was on the market. I was on a standard residential lot at that point, and this was kind of that notable property in my neighborhood where it was a larger lot size, had a lot of nature going on in it. It was the original homestead from the 1950s that kind of got swallowed up when the rest of the city moved in around it.
Wow, that's pretty cool. How big is that space there?
We're about 6 acres.
That's pretty awesome. So you said it was the original homestead of that neighborhood. I mean, how big was that place when, back in the old days?
Good question. And I haven't seen a numerical answer to that question, but I'll instead answer that question by saying one of the buildings that's still right here alongside my house, when I got handed the key to it, it still said hangar on the key. And I did my digging into that enough to realize that is because this property included a private airstrip once upon a time.
Oh, wow.
And what looks like just a sort of warehouse style building next to us at this point was originally the footprint for the hangar on this property.
Wow. Yeah, it's very unique. That is for sure. And I know you've had some issues with water coming through there. The last time we had, it's probably not the first time either, but I know whenever we get a big rain, I always think about you guys.
Absolutely. We are very low slung, and that's part of what leads to a property like this still existing in the middle of things is a substantial portion of the properties in the 100-year floodplain, and that brings its challenges with it. Kind of exacerbated by the fact that we are in a neighborhood, so we're always trying not to put the livestock or the bees, whatever we're talking about, right up on the front fence line adjacent to the neighbors. We're trying to put it a little bit back, but a little bit back tends to be the low slung spots on the property. So we've learned some lessons the hard way, including in that 10.5 inches we got a couple weeks back, we did lose a chicken coop in that. Washed away like it was never there. Fortunately, it was full of ducks at the time, and they all swam back like it was no big deal. They just needed a new home.
That's a blessing there for sure.
Absolutely.
So now the other side of the creek, does that side flood as well, or is it just on the house and building side?
It really is the house and building side, unfortunately. Over on the other side of the creek, upside, that is where I keep my beehives.
Hmm.
And certainly they never have any issues with flooding. We just have flood moments where I couldn't get to them. There are moments when you could not safely cross the creek and get to them, but they're safely out of harm's way above the floodplain over there.
Yeah, that's it's very, and it always surprises me too. You know, before I came over to your place the first time, and you mentioned the beavers. I didn't even know that we had beavers anywhere close by around Dallas or Collin County or whatever. I've since learned that there are other people not too far from me that have beavers on their property as well, and that was just surprising to me.
Absolutely. The beavers and then the river otters surprised me as well. Both those being in the middle of the city, I didn't really expect them to be moving up and down the creeks like they do.
Yeah.
But they are here. They show up. I lost a couple ducks to the otters before my livestock dogs figured out what was happening, and haven't lost any to them since.
Yeah, yeah.
We do our best to coexist.
That's a good thing. If you try to manage nature, a lot of times it doesn't work out too well for one side or the other. Usually the nature side, and that's unfortunate.
Right, right.
So now tell me, what are your plans? What are you looking to do with your property there? I know you have G Bar Naturals, and it's, I guess, listed as an urban farm. And I know you have a lot of things going on. What are your plans there?
Well, in terms of, I guess I'd say real business plans, the things that are probably most feasible that we do are the beef sales, which are from my family's cattle operation, which runs primarily down in the hill country.
Hmm.
But we do have beef pickup days and sell beef by quarters and halves and such. And certainly the work I do with relocation of bees is a substantial part of what we do. Alongside that, like you say, we do have a lot going on, and we do try to make things at least make their own ends meet, if you will. We have chickens, ducks, rabbits. We raise registered kuni pigs as well. Right now, we're in the process of raising a litter of livestock guardian dogs. Um, Previous years, I was raising quail. We um, have a relatively recent baby, and I guess I can say at this point a new baby on the way as well. And so I've been trying to scale down just a little bit. As a result, I'm not doing the quail anymore. That's about as far as I've gotten on the scaling down.
Uh-huh. Now I
In
know.
terms of the real future there,
Go ahead.
I, I was just gonna say, in terms of the real future there, my dream is to be more focused on educational stuff that we can do out of this property. I think if there's a need for urban agriculture, yes, it's for the sake of supply and food to some degree. And of course, we do eat what we raise, and I think there's a lot of value to that. But more than anything, what the city needs from urban agriculture, I think, is education.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's a group that I kind of loosely follow a little bit, the farm team. I don't know if you know anything about them. I think they're kind of veteran focused, but they were in Dallas, and they're now they're moving over to Fort Worth. I just got an email from them that they're moving over to the Fort Worth side of town. And I know, homesteading and gardening and sustaining, raising your own food, chickens, that's really in high demand right now. A lot of people are very interested in it.
Absolutely.
And I don't know, I haven't seen a whole lot of opportunity for the normal homeowner, like us, like me, to go and get training. There are some, and it's interesting to go and take advantage of some of those things. But I could see where that would be a really cool and interesting opportunity for you, especially with where you're at and so centrally located there.
Yeah, it's something that is easy for me to kind of forget and take for granted. I grew up spending 2.5 to 3 days a week down in the hill country visiting the cattle operation, countryside and agriculture kind of experiences. It's easy sometimes to forget that there is not a path to that kind of learning experience for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, that's true. That is true. Now, talk to me about the bees. I know, that's where you and I first met, is with Trinity Valley Beekeepers, and
Absolutely.
we spent a bit of time together there, and and doing some other things too. So talk to me about your bee relocation stuff and what you got going on there.
Yeah, so that's something I've been doing for a number of years now. It's something that, like we're saying, I think the education is a large part of it, but I do also believe in what we're doing in terms of saving bees. We do 100% live relocations. I always have to clarify that for customers. That does not mean that I can save every bee every time.
Yeah.
What that means is that I am never resorting to efforts to kill a colony. It's always about safe colony removal and getting them established in a new location.
Mm-hmm.
Talking to customers, I always liken it to transplanting a plant. This is one eusocial colony of honeybees, and when we move it, we inevitably chop a couple roots along the way. Some of those roots get left behind. Inevitably, they die without the rest of the plant. And yet, when we're moving a plant, we realize without even really thinking about it that we're doing this the way we're doing this because what's important is getting that one organism over here and safely relocated into better circumstances.
Yeah.
Um, and furthermore, I always remind people that's the way the bees see it. If it wasn't, they wouldn't risk dying by stinging. It's all about what's good for the colony.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I know some of the questions that you normally get. I know people are always interested, in honey. What do you do with all that honey? I know the
Yes.
answer, but what do you do with it?
Well, what I do with that honey is feed it back to the bees. At least, certainly, I feel like that's the only safe answer for anything coming out of a structural situation. Sometimes I almost feel different about a tree if by chance you can get to it without a chainsaw. But of course, if you get to it with a chainsaw, it's now covered in sawdust and your opinion's shifted back the other way.
Yeah.
As I understand it, the health department tells us that honey is not safe to eat if it was not out of a managed colony. And essentially, none of the colonies we remove can be claimed as managed before removal. So it's really that simple to me. Um, and it definitely benefits the bees to get fed that honey back as they're trying to recover. Sometimes it's to the colony it came from. Sometimes it's helping out the next guy, so to speak. But I think there's a benefit to leaving it available to them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, do you? I know a lot of times you will put that into tubs and let the bees get it, or do you normally try to feed it back and strap it into frames? So how do you normally do that?
Good point, and I apologize for the puppy sounds. It
Oh,
is
that's
our
okay.
urban farm livestock dogs. I'll blame it on that. Um, in feeding back the honey, good question, and I'm going to give at least two answers to it because I've been doing this for a while. And when I first started into removal work, sometimes I was relocating colonies to a small urban backyard with less space than I have now.
Mm-hmm.
And in that context, I was quick to, sort of rough crush and strain harvest my honey, real old fashioned style. Put it in a
Sure.
big tub or a bucket with some holes drilled in the bottom, crush it up good, and get out what you can. And I would actually feed back in mason jars or standard beekeeping equipment. Water the honey down some. At that point, it's going to ferment, so you don't want to give them more than they can take pretty quickly, but you can feed watered down honey through a standard feeder, no problem. And I did that when I was scared of creating a robbing reaction in a confined backyard setting.
Mm-hmm.
Having more space to put bees when I was taking them out to the country or when I'm taking them here now, generally I do just put the tub outside and let them pick through it, knowing that I can put it somewhere that is 100 yards plus from the beehives, so I'm not inducing robbing, and knowing also that it's 100 yards plus from my neighbors, so I'm not creating a problem for anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it's interesting to see how it's interesting to see how the bees deal with um, available resources, whether it's theirs or some other hives.
Yeah, and you can tell a lot by watching what they do with resources like that when you put them out. I was talking at the beekeeping meeting the other night about the fact that I'm pretty confident we have a better flow going right now than I really thought we did. Simply based on having hit a removal a few days back where I put a bucket relatively full of honey out there where I usually put it, and the bees were paying a lot less attention to it than they were a week before.
Hmm.
Um, to me, that's a pretty solid sign. When the bees aren't coming to honey like they're desperate, we have to have some nectar happen. Sure, you can tell these things by by doing a proper hive inspection too, but it's amazing what you can tell watching behavior outside the
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And do you notice any type of when they're out there on the honey, they're mostly focused on that and not so much people as they're walking by? Are they mostly focused on the resource?
Yeah, I think it does vary with resource availability a little bit how they act about this. At a time when there's some resources available, we're not in an extreme dearth, but they are foraging from scavenging honey like that.
Hmm.
Um, I think they're almost docile like a swarm is docile. You can pretty much walk up and pick up a chunk of the honey without putting your finger down on a bee, and everything's okay. In extreme dearth, they fight more over the honey that they're scavenging. And I think sometimes that leads to them getting a little bit reactive to you walking up into the heart of it.
Hmm.
Um, and then right now, of course, they don't care about the bucket, so they sure don't care if I go knock it around some.
Yeah, yeah. So now, I know I've seen your bee yard back there where you keep your bees. How are you taking care of that? Because obviously well, I know when I was there before, you had a number of colonies back there. How many do you have back there right now, roughly speaking?
I think I'm sitting 15 or 20 right now.
Uh-huh.
Um, and admittedly, it is always a struggle to manage them the way we recommend managing them, sort of best practices style.
Hmm.
Given that removal season and management season are the same busy season.
Yeah.
So I always admit that up front, and I always remind people that's part of why I don't or often don't get a good honey harvest is that I am not necessarily managing them according to best practices. I
Hmm.
know that I lose some colonies to swarms when I'm out picking up swarms, and there's got to be some irony there. And yet, I frequently tell people I'm a professional bee remover and a hobbyist beekeeper. Um, I have more hives than the average hobbyist, perhaps, but in some ways, I'm a hobbyist beekeeper. At best, a sideliner. It is not my main gig.
Uh-huh.
That said, we are in an urban environment. I do manage against swarming to the extent that I'm able, and certainly try to retrieve swarms if I am losing them. Um, but I'm not really emphasizing honey production, and that does let me kind of hedge some things and cut some corners from time to time.
Yeah, well, I know. You and I both know Ruben, and I was so envious of Ruben. He told me how much honey he collected early in the year when Sarah and I took a trip to Italy, and that's a whole different conversation. But he was harvesting honey at that point, and I think he told me he got over 300 pounds of honey. That's like I don't think I've ever collected that much, and he only has I think 4 hives, so
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
pretty.
I don't think I do that per hive.
Yeah, that was pretty
Um,
incredible.
and at risk of praising somebody who might be listening, Ruben's a great example of the kind of beekeeper I wish I was in terms of being organized and keeping up with the details and really truly being on top of the next inspection with notes from the last inspection.
Yeah.
That's a great way to keep bees, and one of these days I'm going to retire and have time to do it that
Retire, huh? I
way.
don't
Uh-huh.
know.
Uh-huh.
That's a word that I haven't quite firmly grasped yet, even at this late gray age. But
Understood.
yeah, no, it's one of those things. I'm definitely interested, and that's what I tell Sarah too. Is like I wish I had more time to do the things that I want to do, and less time having to do the things that I really really don't care to do.
Yep, that's how it goes.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, I know you've been pretty busy with relocation. How was this year compared to previous years with swarms and having to relocate bees?
Um, I would say we started off the year pretty strong, and then we got in that extended dearth, and I have to assume that there's still bees in walls when we hit an extended summer dearth and drought like that. But I think what happens in the Dallas area is people don't go outside to notice that they have bees in their walls when it's hot and dry.
Mm-hmm.
So once that hit us, the demand for removal work, I think, does take a hit until people want to go outside again. In part, that's probably shaded some by the fact that I do primarily residential work. I know Rex and some of the guys that are doing more commercial situations are probably seeing a more stable situation regardless of the weather.
Uh-huh.
But certainly what I see with homeowners is if there's bees in once it gets over 100 degrees, they ignore it until fall when they want to go outside again. A lot of people think maybe this will just go away if I wait. And if I'm not going outside anyway, why wouldn't I wait? And of course,
Yeah,
you and I know that those bees are very likely to still be there next spring if they take that approach.
that's for sure.
Um, but it does play a role in how busy it is. However, overall, I think this year was certainly better for removal work than the last couple. I think part of that is just things being a little bit more stable and feeling less like atypical COVID times for people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm optimistic about this fall. So far, I think we're on a relatively good nectar flow, and if the weather holds and we get some rain again someday, it may turn into a really good fall. Um, with the balancing factor there being at some point, regardless of what the weather and the nectar is doing, I start to feel some inclination to tell people that the bees would prefer that we wait till spring. And that's something that I know different beekeepers have different opinions on. But I think we can all agree there is some point in the season where you need to stop doing removal work based on the seasonality.
Yeah.
It's just a debate over when.
Yeah, I don't. The later we get into the season and later into the year, I think the success rate starts to dwindle pretty rapidly for being able to save those bees if you do a removal.
Yeah, it's not the success rate for getting them out. The customer gets the same results probably, even if we're
Yes.
working unfortunately late in the fall. But the likelihood of the bees truly making it definitely goes down. So if people call me in the fall and say, what's best for the bees? I may say, well, we should do this early next spring. If they call in the fall saying, I need this done, I may say, let's go ahead and schedule it this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's nothing to be done for the bees by having them hire an exterminator instead.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I think in the years I've been beekeeping, I think I've only recommended or suggested that there was only one situation that I know of that um, uh, an exterminator was probably the answer versus a live removal. And I think you know that situation with the lady with the big stone column 2 stories up. Um, and
Yeah,
there was just the cost to be able to get those bees out and where they were just wasn't feasible.
yeah, and there are some spots that are not very feasible. I am quick to tell customers what I would do if it was my home.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some situations where if it was my home, I wouldn't take down the entire chimney if it came to it to get the bees out of it.
Yeah.
And yet there are some ways to get bees out of a chimney. And even though I picked on that situation, we can frequently accomplish that without tearing out a chimney. Um, so it's a shades of gray thing. And of course, always admitting that human health and safety has to come top of the list.
Yeah.
If there's a question of can this be safely done with people around, that's not the kind of thing we want to play with.
Yeah. Indeed. So, what's the most interesting removal you've ever had to do or that you've done?
Oh, well, my favorite story is a bit of a lesson on bees, I guess, also. So I'll tell that one real quick. My favorite one was for the beginning hour of it, one of the most frustrating calls I've ever gotten. Maybe more than an hour. I got called out about bees going in and out of a soffit of a 3-story townhome. And I hate working on a 3-story ladder, but I do have one that long. And this was wedged into the entryway where at least the ladder couldn't fall on me.
Mm-hmm.
So we were working on a 3-story ladder, got up there, opened it up, no bees in the soffit, just bees flying through the empty soffit space and going into the attic. go in through the attic access. Bees carpeting the attic and no comb anywhere.
Wow.
Dead bees literally carpeting the attic. Um, Nowhere left in between one side and the other. We've looked everywhere, and there's still bees flying in while we watch. Went outside, started pacing the sidewalk, thinking, who am I going to call who's done this longer than I have? Because I can't make sense of this. Um, about the time I had a beekeeper's name up on my phone, I had paced down 3 houses or 3 townhomes in this strip of townhomes. And I look up and I think maybe I'm in front of the one I'm working at again because it looks exactly the same and bees are going in exactly the same spot.
Oh, wow.
Turns out this was a drift situation. And these were layers of townhomes built where the third one was the same every time. And it was like that on both sides of the street. And we know bees use landmarks, visual
Yeah.
cues primarily to get home. And
Mm-hmm.
so they were seeing almost exactly the same thing in front of the house that had called me as they were seeing 3 houses down where there was a large established colony.
Oh, wow.
So I ended up having to solve my customer's problem by going down and finding a new customer 3 doors down and then getting this all resolved as one project.
Wow.
And that just kind of was fascinating to me for one, being a challenging but oddly challenging kind of job, and two, having a real lesson about honeybee biology in there as well.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. So, I know you were talking about doing training and educational things. What I know you've been doing a lot of that, especially with Trinity Valley beekeepers, and I know you do talks around the state. What's on your schedule? What do you have coming down the road?
Coming down the road in terms of presentation schedule,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I am down in Bryan, Texas this weekend talking at the Brazos Valley Bee School down there. I'm giving 2 presentations at that one. One is my Fights About Mites talk,
Okay.
which is, you may remember it. It's quite a bit of varroa mite biology and then a lot of backstory on the ins and outs and backs and forths of treatment or not and how they got where, and kind of makes a mockery of the blame game about varroa mites.
Yeah.
And then I'm also giving a talk on native bees at that
Oh,
one.
that's interesting.
So it will be a fun one. I'm going to twist it into a little bit more of an ecology talk rather than just an ID talk like those frequently come out as.
Uh-huh.
And I think it'll be a real good one. And then I know I've got one with one of the club, with the club in Canton, local beekeeping club in Canton coming up in October, where they're letting me try a new presentation on them, which I've called Serial Killer Bees.
Okay.
And it is not about Africanized bees.
Uh-huh.
It is about sort of the ruthlessness with which a honeybee colony operates itself. And I accuse our honeybees of infanticide and cannibalism and regicide and all these things that in human terminology sound awfully harsh and a little dark. And we're sort of justifying it by saying it's Halloween month that month.
Mm-hmm.
But sort of talking about the difference in the bees' perspective on these things versus ours.
Yeah, no, that sounds pretty interesting. I know when we were there on Saturday, I noticed your mason bee, native wasp houses there, and and I've got a couple here going now at my place. So I'm very interested in that for sure. What has been your experience with that? I know you mentioned that you'd had it for a couple of years.
Yeah. With the little solitary bee houses, I find that they are very rarely occupied before you're thinking about throwing them away, basically. I say it that way kind of mockingly, but they really do need to weather some before they see much use.
Mm-hmm.
Smelling like the store is not going to appeal to the bees much. I find that they're used by solitary wasps as well as bees, and I frequently remind people that we should probably see that as a good thing. Everything has a purpose. Wasps are carnivores, but they're relatively close bee relatives,
Mm-hmm.
and probably we can find something to appreciate there too. And like with our bees, social wasps are very disinclined, are much more inclined to sting than the solitary wasps are. Solitary bees are much less inclined to sting than our social bees are. And similarly with natives, I do relocate a couple bumblebee colonies each year, generally speaking. Only one so far this year, but most seasons, by the end of the season, I've got a couple colonies of bumblebees in the yard as well.
Now, the bumblebees, are they mostly ground dwellers?
Yeah, and a lot of times you find it written that they live underground, but in my experience, at least with Bombus pennsylvanicus, which is the main one that I've seen in our area and the main one that I've relocated, they're inevitably slightly below ground level. They're inevitably. I'm trying to get the puppies to be quiet.
That's okay.
Um, they're inevitably a little bit below ground level, but not truly underground.
Okay.
Bumblebees favor a spot that's been used by a rodent as a nest site before, and they kind of use that bedding material. And I find that usually it's sort of a depression with something sheltering it, but not
Okay.
really a tunnel underground. I've never had to dig for a bumblebee relocation. I
Interesting.
work
Very interesting.
I work those entirely at night with red light, trying to make sure to get every bee. It's kind of a different experience to the honeybee work.
Now, as far as that goes, I've heard people say that they've been attacked by bumblebees when they've accidentally, come across their nest and disturbed it. Do you find them more so or less so than honeybees to come after you and sting you like that?
I find that it's a little hard to compare because we're not usually talking about honeybees in the ground unless we're
Right.
talking about a relatively small colony water meter or something. But I would say if we put honeybees in the ground and tried to mow up to them, we'd have about the same experience with the average colony that we see with bumblebees, which is you can probably get your mower up to a couple feet away from the colony before they fully realize what's going on and kind of blow up at
Okay.
you. On some level, that's a pretty non-reactive response that you can be a couple feet from mowing their colony into the dust before they start stinging. I will also say, though, that having bumblebees angry at you, even from inside a bee suit, feels a lot more intimidating sometimes than honeybees. We're used to all this bzz, bzz, bzz stuff, and with bumblebees, it's thump, thump, thump. I mean, it's different, and they can sting multiple times. They're definitely more inclined to be able to sting through protective equipment than the honeybees. Um, that said, most property owners only ever have a problem with bumblebees when they're trying to mow across the bumblebee nest.
Yeah, and the experiences that I've heard were guys on tractors out in fields,
Yeah,
and they happened to run across one.
yeah, and it's hard to blame them for blowing up about that.
Yeah, for sure. So, well, no, that's all good. So I know with Cassie and your new little one coming along, what's her role? What's she liking to do normally? I know right now it's kind of a difficult time for her, but
You're asking about Cassie, not the baby, right?
yeah. What your baby is. I was impressed that she just nonchalant, just hanging out there, and everything was good.
Oh yeah, she's pretty comfortable. She's thinks it's completely normal to have animals running everywhere.
Uh-huh.
But Cassie's definitely in with both feet in all these projects when she's not otherwise occupied with the little ones. Before we were spending a substantial portion of our time pregnant, she was going to bee removals with me as well.
Mm-hmm.
And she really does stay involved. She takes the lead on several things we do here. The Kuni pigs are definitely her project more than they are mine.
Uh-huh.
I still kind of groan about the pigs from time to time, and she's the one that thinks they're cute. Uh, but yeah, we do everything we can to make our goals around here family goals. We definitely disperse the load taking care of some of the projects that way.
Uh-huh.
And I think there will be benefits to our kids growing up with some knowledge of that part of life.
Oh yeah. Well, I know it was clear she had a vision for her chicken yard too. So
Yes, the chickens were definitely her thing when we started into them, and I think perhaps they're a little bit less her thing than they were early on, or maybe I'm just getting myself in trouble. Uh, but certainly the pregnancy time has changed things, and we're looking forward to
Yeah,
getting back into both doing more of everything, I think, once that's done.
yeah. No, that's definitely understandable for sure. And this hot weather is not a friend to the expectant mother in many times.
Oh no, it's not. And and there's no reason we can't relieve her from that right now.
Yeah, indeed. So, well, good. It's great to talk to you. Is there what else do you have? Any other topics that you are interested in that you want to talk about? Because we got all the time that we want to take here.
Oh yeah. Well, I'd be a fool not to take that opportunity to plug my passion project at the moment, which is that I have been working on a writing project, um, centered on the concept that I'm really kind of stretching my native bees talk into being about, which is ecological concerns regarding honeybees and other bee species, pollination impacts, really kind of exploring these questions in depth in terms of, do honeybees belong here? What role does agricultural world play in the natural world? Um, and taking not necessarily just the beekeeper's perspective, but trying to take pretty long term, going all the way back into the fossil record with some of it, considering all the different aspects of that to me justify why I think the honeybee has a place in America.
Hmm.
Conservation has in recent years gone a little bit more what I would refer to as nativist, in terms of not necessarily coming to what I would consider valid assessments of impacts in deciding whether things that aren't from here should be here.
Uh-huh.
Instead, just judging things entirely on, are they originally from here? In that context, honeybees have come up more and more as an animal that was brought by Europeans. Um, and so I'm kind of trying to explore that from, on some level, my gut reaction perspective, which says these are an important part of nature as well as being something humans
Yeah, no, yeah, for sure. I agree. Very, very
brought.
interesting. So, um, I know that we've got native bees here, and I know a lot of people that talk about that, European influence. So it'll be interesting to see, how you come out on that project for sure. Uh,
Yeah, well, I'm probably about half a book worth of rough draft right now. Prior to this, I'd written nothing longer than a journal article or two. So it's definitely been a learning experience in terms of not only the research but the writing.
uh-huh.
But I think I've really benefited from it. I went into it not really knowing what I was going to find on these topics, and was somewhat surprised to find that from where I sit, it seems like the science supports my gut reaction pretty thoroughly. And yet, that's not well communicated into the conservation world. I think part of that is that agricultural science and conservation science are considered two separate fields that don't really communicate with each other very well.
Uh-huh.
And maybe that's not the best, most informative approach in the long term.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. So no, that's great. I'll be looking forward to seeing that come to fruition.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, for
Me
sure.
too.
And I know you've got a good editor there too. So
Absolutely.
so well, no, well, that's cool. And again, I was just so thankful for being able to spend some time with you on Saturday, and it's always I'm always amazed at the people that we have in our kind of our circle here in Dallas Fort Worth. You and we've mentioned several others recently in this conversation. Just incredible people as far as the beekeeping world goes. Several that I haven't seen lately, and I need to get in touch with some people like Darwin. I haven't seen him in a little while. And we mentioned
Absolutely.
Rex and Ruben and James, and there's just a good core group of people around with such a vast knowledge of bees and beekeeping and other topics. So it's very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I totally agree with you. I think we've got a great group here locally. I also think to some degree beekeepers kind of lean that way. There's something about being a beekeeper that is a little bit outside the normal box and a little bit prone to dig into things by yourself because we're not necessarily working bees in a crowd most days. Um, and beekeepers are opinionated, and I love that about
No, they're
about our circle here. We seem to do a good job of not agreeing and yet not disagreeing about it
yeah.
either. So I really appreciate you doing something like this that kind of makes use of those resources. I think it'll be a benefit to the community in the long run.
Yeah, no, I'm looking for it, and I want to have some of those guys in and just have a conversation, and maybe we can do get a couple of us all together and just kind of chat around some things. I did have one other question for you, and I saw some research out of UT San Antonio with the guy that's doing the honey research, looking at medicinal properties of honey from Texas honey. Did you see that?
I am aware of the project, but I know no more about it than what you just said. Yeah, and I think it's a great project from what little I know about it. I think honey is traditionally considered to have medicinal value, and I think we sometimes lose that in the grocery store shelves. I think with the attention that's come for Manuka honey as a medicinal import,
Uh-huh.
on some level, what's been lost is that good local honey does have medicinal impacts as well. I know I've had people tell me they're looking for honey to use in sort of home style veterinary situations. You can
Uh-huh.
put it on an animal for burns and such and not worry about them eating their medicine. Um, I think it's easy to forget all that, and it's something we really need to get back to appreciating.
Yeah, I know. In fact, I did a video earlier, I guess last year, talking about using honey on cuts and scratches that you get around while working in the garden, in the yard, whatever. And I actually showed, when I gotten dinged up when I was picking some stuff up at Home Depot and put some honey on that with a Band-Aid. And I swear 24 hours later, it was like, almost gone. It was pretty amazing. And I put that all on the video. So there's definitely some benefits that I don't think are well understood about local raw honey. And I'm excited to see what this doctor down in San Antonio comes up with in testing. I know he's got about 100 samples of different honeys from the state of Texas that he's doing some testing on to see, what they can find for as it compares to like Manuka honey, to see if there's, what is there available within our honey that's locally produced. So I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, I'll be excited to see the outcome of that as well. I would like to think I know the outcome of that, but we'll look forward to finding out, won't we?
Yeah, have some hard evidence and something that's documented. I think that's really that's kind of my mode. I like to. I'm a show me. It's like there's all kinds of old wives' tales. You should do this, et cetera, and this will cure X, Y, Z. It's like, show me the money. It's like,
Yeah,
let's see the data.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. There's definitely value there.
yeah, and that's kind of the way I like to approach things for sure. So, well, no, it's been good, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. Is there anything else before we wrap this one up?
Oh gosh, John, there's always something else I could say about bees, but maybe I shouldn't start.
Yeah, well, we got time. I do have one more call tonight, but that's all in relation to some good old friends of mine and talking about our Italy trip and maybe seeing what's down the road. So,
Understood.
yeah, so it's all good. Well, I appreciate you taking the time, and we'll put this online, and we'll see what kind of questions we might get in the future, and if there's anything, I'll send them your way.
Wonderful. I'll be looking forward to it.
Cool. Well, I appreciate it, Ryan, for sure.
Absolutely. I appreciate the invite, John.
Yeah, and we'll talk again soon.
Sounds good. Anytime.
So that was good. I appreciate talking to Ryan and sharing some stuff with us, and look forward to spending more time with them. Oh, I guess we had a question. Let me bring you back on here real quick, Ryan, and let me share this. So there was a question that came up. And I kind of asked that for you earlier, but
Oh yeah.
so right now I've only have 3 hives in my back right now. I had as many as 30 back in my backyard, and I'm kind of in a suburban area, and but I'm down to 3 right now because I'm doing some major construction, garden construction in my back right now. What about you, Ryan?
At my peak, I think I was pushing 100 hives, but generally by that point, I'm trying hard to figure out where those hives are going that aren't staying with me. And certainly that wasn't here at the house in Dallas. That was expanded down onto the cattle property, Glen Rose area, and then down into the hill country as well.
Yeah.
In recent years, I've tried to limit myself almost entirely to what I can realistically manage here in Dallas near the house. And at that point, I think 20 to 30 is about the most I can push it to, and still expect them to find what they need.
Yeah, that's the one thing I will say too is that this year was particularly difficult for me. Not only one because I was out of the country for almost a month in between going to Italy and then California, which is kind of like a different country at times, but was out in those 2 places. But getting back here in July was kind of crazy. I know this July was we had for July 1st and 2nd, we're in the 90s, and then it turned on the heat and really went to 100 almost every day in the whole month of July. That made it for me very difficult to actually get out and take care of the hives the way I want to take care of my hives. So that piece alone, it kind of got to the point where I actually may move all of my hives that I currently have over to another bee yard, at least for now, until I get done with the major work that we're trying to do back here. I'm definitely down in 3 hives is pretty sustainable for me right now. Even on hot days, it's still a bit of work to get out there in the direct sun. But yeah, it's still a lot of work, even just with 3 hives.
Yeah, and if this question was more about by the bee yard, if you will, and less about overall numbers, I've found that more than 15 to 20 hives in a bee yard, if it's not at my home, is just not reasonable. It's more than I can really check with the thoroughness that I want to check without wanting to take a break and do something else. I could sure work through them in a pinch if I had to, but to do it the way I want to, I find that about 15 hives is about what I want to do in one sitting. And so if you're having to drive to them, I don't want to go more than that ever again.
Yeah. Well, I will say that one good thing is if you have somebody that you can work with, if there's more than one person, it makes a big difference.
True.
As far as being able to manage more hives. As soon as you have to start going through and start looking at multiple hives and it's 90 plus degrees, it's definitely a challenge. And with more than one set of hands, it makes it a whole lot easier.
Especially if you start doing manipulations that involve moving resources colony to colony, where you actually have 2 things open at once, it makes a world of difference.
Yeah, that's for sure. So I hope that answered your questions. Feel free to ask us anything, and we'll go from there. But it's been we've been coming up on 50 minutes now. And if you have any other questions, you can always send me an email directly to john@twodoves.com. And if you have a question for Ryan, I can pass that along, unless he wants to give his email address.
Oh, my email address is my name at Gmail, spelled just the way you see it there on the screen without the space, at gmail.com. So
you can feel free to ask us stuff. Let's see. He did send one thing. What is this? So just 1 year, I'm up to 8 into the fall. I want 50. Oh, that's a good number. And yeah, we appreciate you attending, and thanks for the questions. 50 is a lot, and that'll get you pretty far.
Everybody's got to have a dream.
That's right. That's right. No doubt. Okay. Well, I appreciate it, Ryan, and I'll let you go, and we'll wrap this up, and we'll call it done, and we'll look forward to getting together again sometime soon. I usually try to organize those beekeeper get-togethers. And it's been, with COVID, it, kind of took a backseat for a long time, but we might be able to figure something out and do something sometime soon.
You tell me when and where.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate it. We'll talk again soon, Ryan.
All right. Sounds good.
Well, that's it, guys. We're going to call it a night there, and we will catch up again soon. We'll probably do another one of these calls. I've got another trip coming up to California, but I may do it from there, and we'll catch up again soon. And thanks for coming, and we'll talk again soon.